Internal disorder in countries or states inevitably spills over into the international community. Cordell Hull, the founder of the United Nations, or the father of the United Nations, was the U.S. Secretary of State under Franklin Roosevelt from 1933 to 1944. He recognized the nationalism of the countries of Europe in 1914 led to and fueled that bloody war. Similarly, the tyrants of World War II also depended on nationalism and other ideologies that were very destructive, not just of the domestic society of their countries, but also very harmful in the international society. America right now is suffering from great internal disorder. It's been called a sickness, and I think that is accurate to a point. The extent of that disorder I will talk about in another video, and probably more correctly said, the type of disorder I will talk about in another video. But this disorder you can summarize as Russification, because the Trump regime is under the control and admires Russia. Russia is a very evil entity, and it has been for a very long time. It's been based on lies. But I don't want to give you the spoiler for a future video. So, an important area in which this disorder is starting to manifest itself here in America is in the international arena. We're hearing Trump talking about seizing Greenland by force. Greenland is a part of Denmark. Denmark is a separate country. On paper, Denmark is an ally of the United States in NATO. NATO, we know, has always been an objective of the Russians in that they want to break it up. So to have Trump talking about taking Greenland by force, attacking an ally by force, is evidence, very strong evidence, proof in my view, that Trump is once again serving Russian geopolitical interests. And it shows the Russification of the Trump regime. But I want to examine this idea of taking property or land by force. In 1931, an American lawyer by the name of Henry Stimson, who was the Secretary of State for Herbert Hoover, came up with a doctrine called the Stimson Doctrine. And that doctrine says that the world does not recognize land or property or territory taken by force from another country. That principle of international law became, that policy rather, became a principle of international law, which is good to this day. Trump's statements and his stated intent to seize land and keep it violates the Stimson Doctrine, violates this idea of international law. Another person who is involved with voicing a great deal of disorder is Stephen Miller, an advisor to Trump. And what I'd like to read you is something from a magazine called El País. The article is Stephen Miller, the most radical voice in Trump's inner circle, and it's from January 11th of 2026. The article describes something that Stephen Miller said on CNN on January 5th. It says, "We live in a world in which you can talk all you want about international niceties and everything else, but we live in a world, in the real world, that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, that is governed by power. We're a superpower. Those are the iron laws of the world." Then the article goes on to call him a champion of, quote, ultranationalist ideas, by which the powerful dictate the terms, and he respects the Lebensraum of other great powers, and the rest of the countries are merely vassals. This is devolution. This is not American. This is the law of the jungle. This is savagery. Again, this indicates that the Trump regime is disordered and it has been taken over and is under the control of the Russians. This has never been an American idea. Throughout our history, especially as seen with the UN Charter, we've always seen the equality of nations and we have always respected that uh, sovereignty of each of the nations. Countries can proceed with making treaties with other countries, and they have done that over time in order to cooperate in making things happen for the betterment of everyone, both within the domestic society and in the international society. And that is part of sovereignty. But what Miller is talking about here is devolution. It is might makes right. It is very troubling. It is very disordered and it goes against American thinking, American history, and the American ethos, which has always been to follow the natural law, which has always been to be obedient to God's will as set forth in the natural law and as it manifested in the law of nations. So, can countries attack and seize the territory of others? No. The Stimson Doctrine says no. They cannot do that. Uh, Furthermore, war is outlawed. What do I mean by that? You can only go to war if it's in self-defense, and you can only go to war if the UN Security Council, or I arguably say the UN General Assembly, pursuant to Resolution 377, which was employed for the purpose of sending troops to Korea to fight back the North Koreans who were the aggressors in 1950. So you can only go to war in defense of yourself or if authorized by the UN Security Council or arguably by the UN General Assembly. This idea of the outlaw of war, again, came from an American lawyer by the name of Frank Kellogg, who was a U.S. Senator from 1917 to 1923, and who was the Secretary of State of Calvin Coolidge from 1925 to 1929. He came up with the principle outlining aggressive war in the Kellogg-Briand Pact, and that principle found its home in the United Nations Charter. The United Nations Charter is a treaty, and every country which has signed on to it, to include the United States, Russia, and all the members of NATO, are bound by that treaty. They are bound legally and they are bound morally. Excuse me. A little sidelight about Mr. Kellogg. There is some discussion about U.S. treatment of Latin America. Well, you need to know that in between 1925 and 1927, Mr. Kellogg actually helped to bring peace to Nicaragua at the request of the Nicaraguans because they had a couple of warring factions literally at war with each other. And American troops came in, brought the peace, and the country was very thankful for a while. Just a little sidelight about Frank Kellogg and about how American foreign policy actually helps people to achieve right order in their societies and end fighting and improve themselves. The principle that Frank Kellogg came up with, that there is no more war, that war is outlawed, is found in Article 2, Section 4 of the United Nations Charter, which states all members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state or in any other manner inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations. So, what would happen if the United States attacked Greenland? Well, that would be a violation of treaties. That would be grossly immoral and very much illegal. It would also be, for anyone involved in it, in the attack, would also be considered a crime, an international crime. Now, I'm going to read from the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. This statute set up the International Criminal Court in The Hague, and it entered into force in 2002. And according to this little booklet I have, it's charged 68 individuals and convicted 10 and acquitted 4. Under Article 8b, bis, the crime of aggression is defined. Now, you'll remember at Nuremberg, the Nazis were tried and convicted of the crime of aggression. Again, the crime of aggression comes from the Americans, Frank Kellogg, and it was an American lawyer and American Secretary of State under Calvin Coolidge. Crime of aggression under the Rome Statute, Article 8 bis, says 1. For the purpose of the statute, crime of aggression means the planning, preparation, initiation, or execution by a person in a position effectively to exercise control over or to direct the political or military action of a state of an act of aggression which by its character, gravity, and scale constitutes a manifest violation of the Charter of the United Nations. So crime of aggression means planning, preparation, initiation, or execution by a person in a position effectively to exercise control over or to direct the political or military action of a state of an act of aggression which by its character, gravity, and scale constitutes a manifest violation of the Charter of the United Nations. For the purpose of paragraph 1, act of aggression means the use of armed force by a state against the sovereign, territorial integrity, or political independence of another state, or in any other manner inconsistent with the Charter of the United Nations. Any of the following acts, regardless of a declaration of war, shall, in accordance with the UN General Assembly Resolution 3314 of 14 December 1974, qualify as an act of aggression. A. The invasion or attack by the armed forces of a state of the territory of another state, or any military occupation, however temporary, resulting from such invasion or attack, or any annexation by the use of force of the territory of another state or part thereof. Then it lists some other examples that are not necessarily relevant right now. Okay, obviously the Russians have done that, and that is what Trump and Miller are threatening right now. So that makes it illegal and a crime. Even if there's an authorization for the use of force against Greenland, which I doubt there will be, and there have been resolutions to that effect introduced in the House and in the Senate as of yesterday, as of last night. I don't know the status of them now. Even with those resolutions, I mean, these are resolutions not to allow the use of force. I'm sorry. But even if, which is a good thing, these are resolutions not to allow the use of force. But if there was a resolution for the use of force, it would be a violation of international law and still subject the people who were the people who planned and executed the resolution. Would subject all of them to criminal prosecution for a violation of international law, specifically the crime of aggression or of aggressive war. So in short, war is outlawed, and we can thank Frank Kellogg and America for that. Thank you.